Join me as we learn Chitas together for Tuesday, the third Torah reading in Parshas Vayeishev, chapter 37, verse 23. Yesterday, in the Chitas we learned, where Yosef was sent by his father to check on his brothers. As he got there, Shimon and Levi say, here's the dreamer. They thought about killing him. Reuven steps in and says, throw him into the pit and don't harm him, as Reuven intended to bring him back to his father and save him from his brothers. Today, we continue as Yosef encounters his brothers. Verse 23. And it was as Yosef approached his brothers. He came to his brothers. And they stripped him of his shirt that he was wearing. Which shirt? The fine woolen robe that his father made for him, Asher Olav, that he was wearing. Eskutante, Rashi tells us, what is skutante? Ze choluk, this is his shirt. He was wearing a regular shirt, and then beneath it, the kseinas hapasim. What's kseinas hapasim? This is shahoisevli aviv yisrael echav. This is the garment that his father made for him, this fine woolen garment that he had, besides that his brothers did not have, that his father made special for him. Verse 24. Vayikachuhu, and they took him. Vayishlichu oisei haboira, and they threw him into the pit. V'haboy reik ein boi mayim, and the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. Rashi, v'haboy reik, the pit was empty, and no water in it. Mimashma she'anemar v'haboy reik, if it tells us that the pit was empty, eini yedea she'ein boi mayim, don't I know that there was no water in it? Why the need for the superfluous explanation saying the pit was empty and there was no water in it? Ma Talmud Lamer, what then is the verse coming to tell me? Ein boi mayim, actually yes, there was no water in it, but there was something else in it. Mayim ein boi, no water. Avon nechoshim v'akrabim yesh boi, there were snakes and scorpions in it. The commentaries explain that yes, why was it that they didn't notice that there were snakes and scorpions in there? Because it was 20 amos deep, and 20 amos tall or deep, a person cannot see. Interestingly enough, that always Parshas Vayeishev comes out around the time of Hanukkah, and one of the rules of Hanukkah is that a menorah cannot be higher than 20 amos high. As 20 amos, the eye cannot see the menorah, and therefore it cannot be that high. The Torah reading now continues with verse 25. Vayeishev lecha lechem, and the brothers sat down to have for a meal. Vayisu einayim, and they lifted their eyes, they raised their eyes. Vayiru, and they saw, v'hine erches Ishmaelim, there's a caravan of Ishmaelites coming. Ba Megilad was coming from the direction of Gilad. Ugmaleim noisim nechois utzri v'loit, and their camels were carrying spices and lotus. And they were heading on their way to go down to Egypt. Though they usually, as we're going to see, they usually traded other stuff, but we'll see the difference of what they were carrying this time and why the Torah finds it necessary to tell us what they were carrying. Urchas, what does the word urchas mean? Shayoras, a caravan. Al Shem Hilche Urech. It comes, the reason why it's called a caravan, because it's on the name of many people that are going on the way together, it's called a caravan. Ugmaleim noisim, and their camels were carrying, as we mentioned, the spices and lotus. Lama pirsam akosef, why does the Torah have to tell me clearly what they were carrying? Es masam, the things they were carrying. L'idiyah matascharin shal tzadikim, to tell us the reward of the righteous. Because generally, shein darken el arvim laseis ela neft v'atr. Generally, the only time that what Arabs usually, the Ishmaelites usually trade and carry is kerosene and tar, which has a terrible smell. Vilazeh, however, for these, for this person, for the tzaddik Yosef, nizdamnu psamim shelo yuzak mereich ra. However, when Yosef was being taken away and he was being carried by the Ishmaelites, God made that they should be carrying something else with spices of better smell, that he shouldn't have to smell the terrible smell. Nechais. What does the word nechais mean? It is not a type of spice, but it's a gathering of many different spices. Kol kinusei psamim harbe. It's a mixture of many different spices. Kori nechais is called nechais. V'chein, We see this also later in the verse in Kings. Vayarim is kol beis nechois, shmirkachas psamav, which over there it also means a combination of all mixtures of spices. Onkelos explains it, loshin shaiva, like a type of wax. Utsri, and tsri, sraf hanoitev meatzei haktaf. This is the sap that drips from the wood, which v'hu notaf animnim samamani actators, and this is a type of one of the type of incense that are mentioned amongst the 11 types of incense of the spices that were brought on the holy temple on the altar. This type of incense as well, this type of sap that would come. Verse 26. Vayomer Yehuda, and Yehuda said, Elochav to his brothers, Ma betza, what is to be gained? Kinare getzachino, that we are going to kill our brother. V'chisinu as damai, and then we'll have to conceal his death. Rashi, Ma betza, Ma momin, what money, what advantage are we going to have? Ketargumi, like the Targum explains. V'chisinu as damai, and we're going to have to conceal the nalim is pasim as misase, we're going to have to conceal his death. Verse 27. Let us go and sell him to the Ishmaelites. V'yadeinu al tiboy, and let our hand not strike him. Ki achim v'sareinu, because for he is our brother of our own flesh. Vayishmu echav, and his brothers heeded to him. Listen to what he had to say. Vayishmu echav, Rashi tells us, v'kabil minei, they accepted what he said. Kol shmiya shehi kabbalas dvarim. Anytime we usually find the term shema, means the acceptance of what is being told. Kigoin, for example, Vayishma Yaakov Aloviv. Yaakov listened to his father. Nasev v'nishma, we will do and we'll listen, we'll follow the rules. As the Targum says, Nikabel, we will accept. The kol shehi shmiyas oizin kamei vayishma skil Hashem lekim yitzhalach begon v'rivka shemas vayishma Yisrael shemaiti yislunes kulam mitargomin ushmo ushmaus ushma shmiya kodami. Many times we find the terminology when he says that they will just listen. Simply just listening, it will be Vayishma'u Shema'as Shamati. But when the word Vayishma means that he will listen and accepting what is said. Verse 28. Vayavru Anashim and Yanim Seicherim, and meanwhile a caravan of Midianite merchants passed by as well. Vayimchechu Vayalu es Yosef, and the brothers then hold Yosef up from the pit. Vayalu es Yosef in Abar, and they hold Yosef up from the pit. And they sold Yosef to the Ishmaelites, the Esrim Kesef, with 20 Kesef silver coins. Then the Ishmaelites eventually sold him to the Midianites, who then in turn, Vayeviu es Yosef Mitzrayim, brought Yosef to Egypt. As Rashi explains the process. This was another caravan of Midianites came. And the pasuk, the verse is telling us here that he was sold multiple times. They hold him out. Who hold him out? Not the Midianites, but Bnei Yaakov, the children of Yaakov, as Yosef and Abar Yosef from the pit. And they sold him to the Ishmaelites. And the Ishmaelites sold him then to the Midianites. And the Midianites, Lemitzrayim, sold him to Egypt. Reuven returned to the pit, and Yosef was not found in the pit. Vayikras begodov, and he tore his clothing. Vayoshev Reuven, and Reuven returned. Where was Reuven? Why wasn't he there? Did he miss the lunch that was there together with the brothers? He was not there when Yosef was sold. Each one of the brothers had a chore that they had a turn that they would have to help their father, and that was his turn, and therefore he wasn't there to buy the selling of Yosef. David Acher, another explanation was, he was busy fasting and mourning the fact that he did something wrong. As we know, Reuven was the one that introduced the idea of teshuvah, of repenting on a sin that he did. And at this point, he wasn't there because he was busy asking for forgiveness and repenting on the sins that he's committed of moving the bed of his father into his mother's tent. The Rebbe learns from here a lesson that when it comes to saving a child, one cannot be busy with their own affairs, and their eyes have to be focused on the goal of saving the Jewish child. Vayoshev Alechav, and he returned to his brothers, Vayemer, and he said, Hayeled einenu, the boy is gone. Va'ani ana aniva, and I, where can I go? What was he saying? Ana aniva, Ona evrach mitzadi shalaba. What am I going to do about the anguish and the pain and suffering that this is going to cause our father? Where will I go and run away from such type of anguish that I will see him in? Verse 31. Vayikhu es kesenes Yosef, and they took the robe of Yosef. Vayishchatu seir izim, and they slaughtered a young goat. Vayitbelu es akutenes badam, and they dipped the robe in the blood. Rashi, why a goat? Rashi tells us seir izim, dame deime shaladam, because the blood of a goat is very similar to the one of a human. This way, Yaakov will think that he was killed by an animal. Hakutenes. When we talk about the shirt, the robe, what are we referring to? The specific robe that Yaakov made for him. Zeh Shema, that was his name. Kashidvuka lateva acheres, when it's connected to another word. Kigoin kesenes Yosef, kesenes apaisim, kesenes bad. Nokut kisenes. When it's connected to another word before it, so it will be kisenes without like a suf. But when it's mentioned over here as well, when we see this one's kesoines of, it's connected to a shirt of who it belongs to, like it's attached to the word next to it. Verse 32. Vayishalchu es kesoines apasim, and they sent the shirt, the robe of Yosef, the fine woolen robe. Vayiviu alavim, and they brought them to its father, and it was brought to its father, to their father. Vayemru, and they said, Zeis masanu, we found this. Hakerna, recognize, identify it. Please identify, Aksenes Pinchai, is this the robe of your son? Eloi, if not. Vayomer, and they said, 33, Rashi, Ksenes. Continuing into the verse. Vayakira, and he identified it, he recognized it. Vayomer, and he said, Ksenes Beni, this is the robe of my son. Chaya roa chalasu, a wild beast has devoured him. Toref, Yosef has been torn to pieces. Rashi, Vayomer kesenes bi. This is a short verse, and therefore it means he says, Hizu, this is actually my son's robe. Chaya ra chalasu, a wild animal has devoured him. What happened over here is, and he concludes that he was torn to pieces. So what is he telling us first? That a wild animal ate him. Nitznitza boy ruach hakodesh, seifesh et izgara by eishes petifar. A spark of divine intuition came to him, that he recognized that eventually there will be a wild animal that will want to attack him, referring to the wife of Potiphar, that will try to seduce him. Rashi continues now with an interesting insight. Why didn't God reveal to Yaakov where Yosef was? Lefi, because Shechrimu, the brothers, said, they banned, and they said, nobody's allowed to say where happened to Yosef. And they cursed anyone that would reveal where Yosef is. And they told God as well, please don't tell our father. We ban you from telling our father. However, Yitzchak knew that he was alive. Omar, Yitzchak said to himself, hey, how can I tell my son where Yosef is? But God doesn't want me to reveal it. Verse 34. Vayikra Yaakov simul Yosef, and Yaakov tore his clothing. Vayosem sak b'masnav, and he put a sackcloth around his waist. Vayisabel al benoy, and he mourned for his son Yabim Rabim many days. Rashi 34. Yomim Rabim, how many days did he mourn for his son? Chaf Beit Shana, 22 years. From when Yosef left him until he came down to Egypt. Shnemer, as it says in the beginning of the Torah reading, Yosef ben Shvas Rishana, Yosef was 17 years old. Ben Shloishim Shana Yibamdul Fifnei, he was 30 years old when they were standing in front of Pharaoh. V'sheva Shnei Asav, then you have the 7 years of plenty. Ushnosayim Arav, and the 2 years of hunger. Kishabo Yaakov Mitzrayim, when then Yaakov ultimately came to Egypt. Harei Chaf Beishana, so you have 22 years. Why 22 years? Keneged Chaf Beishana Shleikayim Yaakov Kibud Aveim, for the 22 years that Yaakov himself did not observe the commandment of honoring his parents. For the Chaf Shana Haya Beis Lavan, for the 20 years that he was in Lavan's home. Beis Shanim, and then the 2 extra years that he delayed after Lavan until he actually made it back to Hebron. B'derech B'shuvim Beis Lavan, for the 2 years that it took him to get back home from Lavan's home. Shana v'chatzi was for a year and a half, the Sukkos. Shisha Chadashim Beisel, and 6 months in Beisel. Therefore he told Lavan, I'm 20 years in your home. Lihain alayhain v'seifi lilkas kenegden. They are my years, meaning I am going to be punished for these years later on. Verse 35. And all his children, his sons and his daughters attempted to console him. But he refused to be comforted. And he said, I will go down Avel Sha'ila in mourning for my son. I will go down to the grave mourning for my son. Vayevkei Aviv, and his father wept for him. Rashi, the Chol B'Noisav, this is the first mention that we find of his daughters. Where did the daughters come from? And Rashi explains as follows. There is two opinions. Rabbi Yehuda says, Achoyes tu'umis noldim kol shevet v'shevet. Every one of the tribes was born with a twin girl. Unesom, and they married each other, 4 wives. Rabbi Nechemya says, actually these women, the women of Yaakov, were not Jewish, Kanani Yesaya. They were from Canaanites. Elamau v'chol b'noisav, what does it mean? All his daughters, kaloisav, daughters-in-law. A person does not refrain from calling his son-in-law his son and his daughter-in-law his daughter. And therefore, in this case, these were the daughter-in-laws of Yaakov, not his actual daughters. He refused to be comforted. One cannot be consoled and comforted about a person who is still alive. V'savur shemeis, and mistakenly thinks that he died. Because as we know, the Medrash tells us that only on a dead person did God make a decree that eventually the person tends to forget about them. However, a person that's alive always stays alive and remembered with that individual. Ered el bani, Kimoi, what does it mean? I'm going to go down to the grave mourning with my son. Albani, because of my son. The harbe el meshamshim meloshin al. Many times we find the word el can be al, to and about. El shol vel beis adamim. El haloka charin elikim vel chamavisha. Rashi gives 2 other examples from God telling David of what was the sin and the punishment that happened, and as well as we find in other places because of the sin of the ark and because of King Saul as well. Avil sha'ila, what is sha'il? Kipshute. The word sha'ila is in simple terminology, means loshin keverhu, down to the grave. V'lo yasnachim kol yomai. What this means is that he will be mourning throughout his life, that even when he goes down to the grave, he will never be able to be comforted about the very fact that his son is no longer here. Umedrashi, the Medrash explains that sha'il over here doesn't only mean grave, it means purgatory, Gehinnom. And this is what Yaakov was saying to himself. Yaakov had a sign that was given to him by God. If none of my children die while I'm still alive, muftachani, I am guaranteed, I will not see purgatory. But now that one of my sons died, I know that I will be going to purgatory. Vayeishev Aviv, and his father cried. Why was he crying? Who was crying? Yitzchak, his father was crying. In this case, his father is referring to Yitzchak, was crying for the very fact that he sees his son Yaakov going through such turmoil. But Yitzchak, it doesn't say that he was mourning. Because Yitzchak knew that he was alive. Verse 36. And the Midianites sold him to, this was going back to Yosef, that meanwhile the Midianites had sold him to Egypt. Who in Egypt? To Potiphar, the courtier of Pharaoh and the chief of the butchers. Rashi. Hatabachim. What is tabachim? The butchers of the king, that they were the ones that would have to prepare the meals for the king, and Potiphar was the one that was in charge of these butchers of them. This concludes the Torah reading for Tuesday, the 3rd Torah reading of Parshas Vayeishev.